Tonight on Bridge City News, the Downtown Watch implemented by the Lethbridge Police Service now has escorted walks to help you feel even safer. The fight to have safety belts installed into school buses continues. We hear from Lethbridge MP Rachel Harder, who's been campaigning to keep our kids safe. And the federal carbon tax for Alberta will kick in January 1st. Environment Minister Catherine McKenna has the details.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Robbins.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. The investigation into the sexual assault of an 8-year-old boy at Henderson Lake continues. Lethbridge police are currently looking for a man in his 60s who lured the boy into a washroom at Henderson Lake where the sexual assault took place. The Chinook Sexual Assault Centre in Lethbridge has already dealt with a number of cases where minors have been involved. The centre says that dealing with childhood sexual abuse is a very complex issue.
It really is about working with them on where they're at. Developmentally, they may be at completely different stages than what their age may indicate. And so being aware of their sexual development, their behavior development, and their cognitive development is really important for us so that we can speak at their level, we can work with them where they're at. And with any case, it's really important that we follow the lead of the victim, of the survivor, on what they see as being beneficial as well. And kids are remarkable. They really do know what they need. They really do know, where they want to go next. And we need to hear what they're saying.
The Government of Alberta has released a list of names and faces who are considered high-risk offenders online. Lethbridge offenders are included in that list. The Watch downtown is now offering an escorted walk within a patrol area. The Safe Walk initiative is available daily between 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. The service offers help to allow you to reach your destination safely.
Starting today, the local community can access, we have a dedicated line through one of our team leaders, which is 715-WALK or 715-9255. They can contact that number if they feel that they need to be walked to a vehicle or to another residence or establishment downtown. Those watch members will do that. We'll do that patrol piece where we'll send two staff to escort them where they need to go to.
Hansen says we can always recognize the volunteers by their red jackets. To learn more about Safe Walk, you can call 403-715-WALK or 403-715-9255. It is the end of the second week of the retrial of David and Colette Stephan, the couple who was originally convicted for failing to provide the necessaries of life for their 18-month-old son Ezekiel, who died of bacterial meningitis in 2012. Pediatric specialist Dr. Shauna Burkholder took the stand this week. She testified that blood cultures were taken in both Cardston and Calgary, but only after ceftriaxone, an antibiotic for bacterial infections, was administered. The drug takes only hours to take effect, and it's a possible key as to why no bacteria was found in the toddler. The trial continues on Monday. It has been a historical week for the Blood Tribe. A judgment from the federal government says the tribe is entitled to an extra 162.5 square miles to their current 540 square miles. As Jeanette Rocher explains, the big claim has been pursued for more than 35 years.
Miles and miles of land on this southern Alberta prairie, and much of it belongs to the Blood Tribe. Currently, the Blood Reserve is the largest reserve in all of Canada, but it should be even bigger according to the federal court decision on a claim and a fight that's been going on for 39 years. The Blood Tribe claims that Canada is in breach of the Blackfoot Treaty. Under the treaty, the Blood Tribe is entitled to 710 square miles, but currently sits on 547.5 square miles. The court on June 12th found that the tribe is owed the remainder. In standoff today, Blackfoot elders were thrilled with the news.
This is a real historical event. It's been over a century when this thing happened. And I believe they had tried it before, trying to negotiate about the land, but never came forward.
I think it's one of the most historic events that have happened to the Blood Tribe for over a period of time. It's a day of celebration, of course. With many of our people, yeah. And of course, we wish to acknowledge all of the people that worked so diligently, for the outcome of the claim number one, the legal people that represented us, and of course our elders and many traditional people that told the story about the claim itself.
For Bridge City News, I'm Jeanette Roche.
Dignitaries and the public came together today to celebrate the grand opening of the final phase of the ATB Centre. At home is the Cor Van Ray YMCA. BCN's Loris Alexander reports from the sophisticated 380,000 square foot facility.
After nearly 3 years of construction, the Cor Van Ray YMCA opened its doors to the public on May 4th of this year, but this morning was the grand opening.
We opened with the soft opening in early May. We didn't know exactly how it was going to go. So over these past 5 weeks, we've been really encouraged by the response. The community has really come out and supported, and we're just pleased to be able to celebrate that fact today.
The Lethbridge YMCA is the third largest in North America at 256,000 square feet.
It's going to provide so many options. We saw the high school curling championships hosted here. That's the Alberta High School Curling Championships. We saw the Alberta High School Leadership program hosted here, and there's so many other things that we can use this facility for, where we can showcase not only this facility but our city.
In the few short weeks that the Cor Van Ray YMCA has been operational, they've seen more than 65,000 visitors and have 5,300 members.
Attendance has been amazing. Really, it's exceeded our expectations as an organization in terms of number of memberships that we were hoping to achieve. We had a yearly target for our first year, and we've already exceeded that in the first 5 weeks of being open.
For more information about all the amenities available, please visit atbcenter.ca. For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
Father's Day is a time of fellowship and celebration for many families, but for some, it can be a very difficult time. As Ainsley O'Reilly discovered, one man in Lethbridge is finding this time of year to be quite difficult.
Michael Rivard has been sober for 27 years, and he says he couldn't have done it without the grace of God.
As a Christian, I have learned that to say my name is Mike, I'm an alcoholic, I don't use that no more. My name is Mike.
His mission is to eventually open up a recovery center with a tough love mentality. He's also got a book coming out called Addiction, Life, Death, and Jesus. He wishes more Christians would give back too.
When God gives you the gift of being free from addiction, you got to pass it on. You got to give it back. And there are a lot of Christians that have beat addiction, and some give back, not a big percentage. When you see so many people hurting, not just in the drug and alcohol, but addiction, there's so many.
A former businessman and father, Michael has been through a lot. His teenage daughter doesn't live with him. His son struggles with addiction, and his 25-year-old daughter recently passed away. Father's Day is around the corner, and Michael says it'll be bittersweet.
27 years sobriety on Father's Day. And not hearing from Brittany, I don't know if I'll hear from the other two, and I have to be okay with that. I have to be okay. It really is. It's, well, there's other fathers going through it too. Other mothers too. Other grandparents that are going through it. So I'm not in the boat by myself. And with my faith and prayer, I'll get through it. And with the people in my life.
This Sunday, you can find Michael at Streets Alive, serving ice cream cake to the less fortunate. For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
The Alberta government has introduced legislation that some say would strip some bargaining rights from close to 200,000 public sector workers. Union leaders are calling it a violation of public trust. Workers who've been taking pay freezes are by law to have their wage rates reviewed and subject to binding arbitration. Bill 9 proposes to cancel those hearings until after October 31st. The government says the move is necessary as it looks at where to cut spending. A story we've been following closely on Bridge City News is that a committee of MPs decided not to call for seatbelts to be installed in Canadian school buses. Many felt that further study needed to be done. Unions are concerned about liability, and cost was also a factor. Retrofitting each bus would cost up to $20,000 per bus. Lethbridge Conservative MP Rachel Harder put in her 2 cents when it came to getting seatbelts in school buses. Rachel MP said conflicting evidence from experts about seatbelts in school buses points to the need for further study. What are your thoughts?
Now that this report has come out and we're aware of the different opinions that are out there, certainly witnesses that came forward are all experts in one way or another. They came from different vantage points. They offered helpful information. At the end of the day, it's up to the MPs to make a decision with regards to what they're going to recommend to the department. They already determined that they are not recommending mandatory seatbelts. So for myself, I would be advocating for further study. I believe that this issue does need to be looked at very closely. We certainly have evidence to suggest that a 3-point harness is a good way to go. But I also understand the viewpoint that there are some complexities there and there is a cost involved. But again, we have to consider what is best for our children.
That was Lethbridge Conservative MP Rachel Harder. The federal government announced that the federal carbon tax will be implemented in Alberta beginning January 1st. The federal levy Ottawa is implementing will take place of the provincial carbon tax, which was repealed by Premier Jason Kenney and the UCP. Federal Environment Minister Catherine McKenna told reporters that Ottawa will not be raising the carbon tax after the year 2022.
It's unfortunate that we're in this situation with another Conservative premier politician who doesn't seem to understand that pricing pollution is proven, that provinces that have had a price on the pollution have been the fastest growing in the country, and the pricing pollution is the most efficient way to reduce emissions and tackle climate change. We need to move forward to tackle climate change. We see the impacts of climate change through extreme weather, including in Alberta.
A lot of groups today like to discuss climate change, and in particular, global warming. Many have blamed the Northern Alberta wildfires on climate change. Is the Earth really warming, and if so, to what degree? A recent article published by Tom Harris and Dr. Jay Lair said the Earth's atmosphere is actually cooling. The writing involves research from a NASA scientist. Dr. Jay Lair is Senior Policy Analyst with the International Climate Science Coalition, and he joins me now on the telephone. Dr. Lair, can you explain why Martin Mullenzak, the scientist in question, is stating the opposite of what we're typically hearing from climate scientists and certain federal politicians?
Well, I actually think it was probably an unapproved mistake that he's in charge of a couple very high-powered new satellites that are collecting data in the upper atmosphere that clearly showed that the heat exchange had changed such that the atmosphere was actually cooling rather than heating. And I think the way he said it, it was kind of like gleeful, a new finding, and he was in charge of these 2 new satellites, and it came out in the end of October, and then there was nothing more about it. I'm even going to guess that he was probably chided by his overseers at NASA for letting out any information that might confuse the public over the claim by NASA and NOAA, who are in the pocket of the climate alarmists, that there could be any data showing that carbon dioxide emissions from mankind were not continuing to heat up the Earth.
Dr. Jay Lair, Senior Policy Analyst with the International Climate Science Coalition. Ottawa announced a huge financial boost to the RCMP to tackle money laundering. Finance Minister Bill Morneau made the announcement after meeting with ministers in Vancouver.
Today, I'm happy to announce an additional $10 million going to the RCMP so that we can coordinate to get the information and have the systems so that we get that ability to actually prosecute. It's really critically important.
Certainly, we are a world leader when it comes to beneficial ownership and now requiring a registry for numbered companies so that people can no longer hide behind the corporate veil. They, in fact, will have to disclose who's buying real estate in British Columbia. We're sharing that information with our colleagues across the country in hopes that we will see continued efforts because, as we all know, and I think it's the importance of today, criminals don't know boundaries.
They don't know provincial borders. If we close loopholes here, we know that dirty money will be looking for another opportunity.
Victoria, BC's battle over funding Remembrance Day is over. Last night, City Council quietly decided to pay for Remembrance Day ceremonies out of its own contingency fund after enduring a Canada-wide backlash.
Council voted this evening to fund Canada Day, special events, and Remembrance Day with funding from our budget for this year. What tonight's decision shows is that Victorians are willing to listen to Canadians, and that is what a capital city should do. When capital cities hear feedback from across the country, I think it behooves us to listen very carefully to that, and that's what's happened here tonight. So I know that there was some original, consternation, and rightly so. I mean, I shared it, quite frankly, with the majority of Canadians. But what has happened here tonight is Victorians have heard very clearly that Canada supports our veterans, Canada supports our serving members, and what's happened here tonight is a very strong sign that so does Victoria.
The number of opioid deaths involving fentanyl is growing in Saskatchewan. That's according to the Public Health Agency of Canada. In 2016, 11% of Saskatchewan opioid deaths involved fentanyl. Last year, deaths involving the drug jumped 45% of the province, which is the largest increase in Canada. More than 4,400 Canadians died of opioid-related overdoses last year. New cannabis products like edibles and beverages will go on sale in Canada legally in mid-December. The federal government announced that regulations will come into effect on October 17th, and the products will be available about 2 months later. The new regulations will give authorized distributors and retailers access to 3 new classes of cannabis products, which are edibles, including candy and baked goods, cannabis extracts, and cannabis tropicals, which include ointments and oils. Alcoholic beverages infused by cannabis will still be prohibited. An anonymous donor in Winnipeg just spent $700,000 to help settle more than 100 refugees from several countries, including Somalia. The Good Samaritan with deep pockets is described as non-denominational, is not from Africa, and knew nothing about the refugees other than they needed help. A volunteer with the Archdiocese of St. Boniface says the donor was a private person with strong convictions and said, quote, "What we do for ourselves dies with us. What we do for others in the world remains and is immortal." The Toronto Raptors are bringing the Larry O'Brien Trophy to Canada for the first time ever after a thrilling 114-110 victory over the Golden State Warriors in Game 6 of the NBA Finals. Raptors star Kawhi Leonard was named the Finals MVP.
You just got to go take the guys you got and go play and manage it the best you can. And it was a great group, though. They really played together. I thought they really fought hard. They were tough-minded. They didn't seem like this was wearing on them at all. 2 months of playoff basketball, they never seemed tired to me mentally. They kept wanting the film sessions. They kept wanting to walk through things. They kept wanting to keep learning and improving, and I think that was a big key because we had to do that in the playoff run because we really hadn't had all that much time together.
Obviously, I didn't come out in this series trying to win it. It was a whole group collectively. Tonight, Fred played amazing in that fourth. Kyle played amazing tonight throughout the whole game. Pascal played big. And, I just kept striving and, pushing. And, I ended up with the trophy, but everybody deserves it. That's one of the things that, I take on the floor. I don't care about what media has to say about me or if they want me to score or whatever, 30 points. Because I did the game before, I'm going to come out and play the right way. I'm not trying to make headlines. And, that's just things that, I pretty much learned just throughout this journey of being in the NBA.
Meanwhile, tens of thousands of people around the country celebrated the Raptors' thrilling win over Golden State last night. The biggest celebration was at Jurassic Park, just outside of Scotiabank Arena in Toronto. This is the first NBA championship for a team playing outside of the United States. Congrats again going out to the NBA champion Toronto Raptors. There's a nice ring to it. There's some terrific movies playing at the Movie Mill once again this week. With the details, here's the owner of the mill, Mr. Len Binning, with another Movie Mill Minute.
Well, Disney's back at it. Dumbo, the live-action adaptation, stars Danny DeVito as the head of a struggling circus. Colin Farrell is tasked with taking care of a new elephant with extraordinary large ears. When they find out he can fly, it changes things for the circus.
You have something very rare. You have wonder. You have mystique. You have magic.
Well, we've got a new superhero. Brie Larson stars as Captain Marvel. Earth is caught in between the galactic battle between two alien races, and it's up to her to save the day.
Space invasion, big car chase. Truth be told, I was ready to hang it up till I met you today.
A family animated film by the name of Ugly Dolls, set in, where else? Uglyville, where Moxie and her friends celebrate the fact that they're different, that they're unique, and beauty is more than skin deep.
Welcome to the Institute of Perfection. Remember, only pretty dolls will meet their perfect human match.
You're an engineer/model. You're a boy doll/model. You're not a model.
Data does not compute.
More terrific movies at the Movie Mill once again. We had some much-needed moisture for our farmers today. Will the rain continue into the Father's Day weekend? I'll have weather details coming up in just a moment. We had light showers again tonight, a 30% chance of rain developing with a low near 10 degrees. Tomorrow the clouds should clear away and we should see a high near 21. Mainly sunny on Father's Day with a high near 25. A low pressure system returns on Monday, bringing light showers and a high near 24. Tuesday, rain again with a high of 21. Rain and 16 for Wednesday, showers and 15 degrees for Thursday. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 22 and an average low of 9. The highest temperature in this state was recorded in 1987 at 34 degrees, and the record low was +3 in 1952. Sunrise was at 5:23, sunset at 9:40. Let's see how tomorrow's shaping up across the country now. Mainly sunny at 23 for both Vancouver and Victoria. Sunshine and 20 is on tap for Calgary. A good chance of thunder showers at 21 for Edmonton. Showers and 15 degrees for Regina. Thunder showers and 18 for Saskatoon. Increasing cloud and 19 for Winnipeg on Saturday. A chance of showers and 22 for Toronto. Rain and 19 for both Ottawa and Montreal. In the Maritimes, Fredericton, New Brunswick will be mainly sunny and 25. Partly cloudy and 24 for Halifax, Nova Scotia. Charlottetown, PEI will have a few clouds and 23. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect drizzle and a high of only 7 degrees for tomorrow. It is looking more and more like the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion will go ahead. Our parliamentary reporter Ray Fillion says Ottawa is committed to beginning construction on the much-needed pipeline.
Canada needs a yes to TMX pipeline on June 18th. Listen, all signs point to the federal government approving that project. They bought the project, they bought the existing pipeline. I don't see how they could say no to that, but the big decision is expected to come down on Tuesday, right after that cabinet meeting.
Ray will have more on the TMX along with details of how the Liberals' popularity may now be improving. That's coming up after business news. News that 2 tanker ships suffered suspected attacks in the Gulf of Oman pushed up the price of crude oil. Business journalist Charles Sheehan takes a close look at the Strait of Hormuz and its importance to the global economy.
From what we know, there was an incident that left 2 oil tankers damaged. This comes a month after a similar incident in which 4 oil tankers were damaged by mines, and that is suspected in this incident as well. The Strait of Hormuz is essentially the doorway to the Persian Gulf. So Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq are surrounding the Persian Gulf, and this is the only exit from that region to the open sea. So any oil coming out of the Middle East passes through the Strait of Hormuz. There was an immediate spike in oil prices. The price went up about 3 to 4% right after this news of this incident began to emerge. However, oil prices this year are plummeting. We're at a 5-month low. Prices are down, I believe, 13% this month alone, and that's because of slowing global economic growth and also the burgeoning trade war, which the United States is very involved in.
Some of the world's major oil producers committed to supporting economically meaningful carbon pricing. The pledge came at the end of the Vatican Climate Summit, where Pope Francis urged action to save God's creation. The companies, including ExxonMobil, Royal Dutch Shell, Total and Chevron said in a joint statement that government should set pricing regimes at a level that encourages business and investment. The CEOs also called for companies to provide a plan to transition to cleaner energy services. Canadian airline passengers have long been frustrated with inconsistent rules and regulations surrounding passenger rights. That is especially true when it comes to what compensation is owed for flight delays. Crystal Eratokritou is a legal advisor for AirHelp, and she says if you ever run into a problem with an airline, you can give them a call.
You can use AirHelp services. It is very easy. You just have to go on our website, airhelp.com. You give us some information about your flights. You upload your documents such as e-ticket, boarding pass, and from then AirHelp will take care of all the process. We will be fighting with the airlines. We always try to settle things amicably, but if this is not possible, we will take legal action on the passengers' behalf, and the passengers will not have to do anything.
Catch the full interview with Ms. Eratokritou discussing passenger rights and details of some of the new regulations coming into effect on July 15th. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will meet with U.S. President Donald Trump next week to discuss ratifying the new North American trade agreement along with the detention of 2 Canadians. Trudeau's office says he will visit Washington next Thursday. He and Trump are trying to build momentum to pass the new trade deal that also includes Mexico after the U.S. lifted tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum. The Prime Minister's office also said Trudeau will bring up the plight of the 2 Canadians held in China in an apparent attempt to pressure Canada to release the Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou. Now, here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, new cannabis products like edibles and beverages will go on sale in Canada legally in mid-December. The federal government announced that regulations will come into effect on October 17th and the products will be available about 2 months later. It appears as though the Trans Mountain Expansion project could be a go and very soon. Our parliamentary reporter Ray Fillion has details next. But first, here's a look at what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News Community Calendar. The McNally Community Association is presenting World of Whimsy, a fundraising gala tea and international hat fashion show on Saturday, June 15th from 2 to 4 p.m. at the McNally Community Center. Come for a fun time and the opportunity to win amazing door prizes, including a diamond pendant from Tompkins Jewelry, a champagne brunch and train ride at Aspen Crossing, and much more. Tickets are $35 and are available at Country Blooms Garden Center and the Jasmine Tea Room. For details, visit mcnallycommunity.ca. Father's Day at the Fort is taking place Sunday, June 16th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at Fort Whoop-Up in Indian Battle Park. Bring your dad and take part in historical activities. Plus, South Alberta Horse Artillery will be performing in the afternoon. For more information, visit fort.galtmuseum.com. Come celebrate with your Latin American neighbors at the Festival Latino Lethbridge 2019, taking place Saturday, June 29th, beginning at noon at Exhibition Grounds, Pioneer Park. Presented by the Lethbridge Latin American Association, enjoy live entertainment, dance performances, traditional Latin food, and much more. All are welcome to this free event. For details, visit llaa.ca. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
Many premiers and energy ministers are not happy with the latest version of Bill C-69, or the anti-energy bill, as Alberta Premier Jason Kenney likes to call it. To talk more about what is happening in Ottawa in relation to our energy sector is our parliamentary reporter Ray Fillion. Ray, 5 premiers wrote in to our Prime Minister and all agreed that the latest version of C-69 is irresponsible.
Yeah, they wrote that urgent letter to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, urging him to accept amendments put on the table by Conservative senators. They said that failure to do so would be problematic national unity-wise, which is something the Prime Minister called irresponsible on their part. But nevertheless, Mr. Trudeau's government rejected 90% of the proposed amendments by the Tory senators. So obviously nothing for those premiers to rejoice about. One of the main signatories of that letter, of course, was Alberta Premier Jason Kenney. He was in Quebec on Wednesday. And one of the things that Prime Minister Trudeau said was that he was hoping that Mr. Legault, the Quebec Premier, would talk some sense into him about the environment. Problem is, Hal, Mr. Legault in Quebec City is also against Bill C-69 in its current form because he believes that the federal government would duplicate some of the provincial powers, so it would be a jurisdictional problem in his eyes. He wouldn't go as far as to sign the letter that the other premiers signed because the reasons he disagrees with Bill C-69 are different than the other premiers. But still, he says he was angry on Wednesday, Mr. Legault, that the federal government had rejected the proposed amendments. So 7 out of 13 premiers across Canada now have an issue with Justin Trudeau's Bill C-69. The environment obviously is once again proving to be a minefield for the current Prime Minister.
Yeah, very true, Ray. Now, the feds are set to make a decision next week on the fate of the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion project.
Well, Tuesday is the big day. As you know, the government has said for months that they would make a decision by June the 18th. Now, June the 18th is Tuesday of next week. That's when the government is probably going to have its last cabinet meeting here in Ottawa. So we're expecting the big decision to be made at that point. Now, the Alberta government is keeping up the pressure. There are billboards across the city. You can see them on roadside highways, near highways, and on bus here. They say Canada needs a yes to TMX pipeline on June 18th. Listen, all signs point to the federal government approving that project. They bought the project. They bought the existing pipeline. I don't see how they could say no to that. But the big decision is expected to come down on Tuesday, right after that cabinet meeting.
Yeah, we can't wait here in Alberta, let me tell you right now. The Parliamentary Budget Officer, or the PBO, report on the carbon tax came out recently, and you have details of what was in it.
Yeah, the carbon tax, as you know, applies to several provinces. 4 right now. We understand that Alberta is going to be hit with it pretty soon. The carbon tax is at $20 a ton as it stands. The price is set to go up to $50 a ton by 2021. But in order for Canada to meet its commitments under the Paris climate agreement that Canada signed in April of 2016, the Parliamentary Budget Officer says the price would have to be raised to $102 a ton by 2030. And that would add 23 cents, he says, to every liter of fuel that you buy, every liter of gas that you pump into your car. The Environment Minister said that the government doesn't intend to go there. It doesn't intend to increase its carbon tax rate beyond $50 a ton. She said the PBO's report is wrong. She claims that he didn't take into account many things that the government recently announced. But Mr. Giroux, the PBO, the Parliamentary Budget Officer, was adamant on Thursday morning. If nothing changes, Canada will not be able to meet its target for reducing the country's greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, as it promised to do under the Paris Climate Accord a few years ago.
Ray, many view Justin Trudeau's plan to ban single-use plastics is seen as an election tactic. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, that's a big announcement that the Prime Minister made just outside Montreal on Monday morning. He announced that single-use plastics will be banned in Canada starting in 2021. But it's a plan that's lacking a lot of details. It's not really a plan that he unveiled. We don't know, for example, the exact list of items that are going to be banned in Canada. It's probably going to entail plastic straws, plastic bags, all kinds of things. But we won't have the full list for a couple more years. And that plan, as I said, will only come into force in 2021, so 2 years after the next federal election. So it's leading a lot of people to conclude that it's just an election promise that still needs to be fleshed out, obviously. The reason for this is because the environment, as we've discussed, you and I, a few times on this show, is shaping up to be a major issue in the next election. You got parties on the left, the Green Party, the NDP, and Justin Trudeau's Liberals, who are trying to out-green one another. They're trying to seduce the segment of the electorate, which is kind of big in Canada, that cares a great deal about the environment. So I think that was Mr. Trudeau's intent on Monday morning for announcing a plan, really a concrete plan right now. And the Prime Minister is also getting a lot of flack over Trans Mountain. You know, the fact that they bought the existing pipeline, that they're about to greenlight the multi-billion-dollar project to expand the pipeline. So I think he's trying to win back some of those people by offering a policy like the plastic ban that he presented on Monday.
Ray, despite our PM's recent stumble and mumble discussing water bottles and water boxes, it appears as though the bleeding has stopped for the Liberals?
That's right. That's according to an Angus Reid survey. You know, for months, the Liberals were losing support in public opinion following the SNC Lavalin affair. Their numbers went up by 1% in the last poll. That was the results of which were published this week. So that's leading the polling firm to say that the bleeding has stopped for Mr. Trudeau's political party. Yet the Conservatives are still way ahead. 37% of respondents said they would cast a ballot for the Conservatives if an election were held now. 26% say they would vote Liberal, 15% for the NDP, and 12% for the Green Party of Canada. Their support, Elizabeth May's party's support, keeps going up. I mean, they're only 3% behind Jagmeet Singh's New Democrats here. The Conservatives, also according to this poll, are leading in every single region of the country. But of course, the real survey is still a little over four months away, as we all know.
That's very true. Now, it turns out our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, is not comfortable now with the term genocide in regards to the report on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, even though he called it that earlier.
Yeah, we talked about this last week. The National Inquiry concluded that it's genocide. At first, the Prime Minister didn't use the word in his speech. He later said he accepted the conclusion, but he gave an interview earlier this week to a Montreal radio station in which he said that the term cultural genocide would be more appropriate. So obviously his government not comfortable with the word genocide. Andrew Scheer, the leader of the Conservative Party, also not comfortable. He said it quite clearly during a news conference here on Parliament Hill earlier this week. He says what happened is a tragedy, but to call it a genocide, he's not comfortable with that either. Meanwhile, we're still waiting to hear from the government exactly what they're going to do about that report, if they're going to follow the 231 recommendations or calls for action that the report has issued.
The Prime Minister has attacked Andrew Scheer following the revelation that Scheer consults with former Prime Minister Stephen Harper on some of the big decisions, Ray.
Yeah, this is in an interview that Mr. Scheer gave to Quebec Magazine a few weeks ago. He revealed that he almost never makes a major decision without consulting with the former Prime Minister, Mr. Harper. Now, as you know, the Liberals have been trying to tell Canadians in the past couple of years that Andrew Scheer is just a smiling version of Stephen Harper, that the party hasn't really changed. So this week they were back at it. They say that this quote from Mr. Scheer is proof that the party hasn't changed. They're trying to use Mr. Harper's name to try and give the party, Mr. Scheer's party, a bad reputation. We're going to have to see whether or not it works. I know Stephen Harper is still very popular with many Canadians. Many Canadians say they miss the former Prime Minister. They'd like him to come back. So I don't know if that strategy is going to work for the Trudeau Liberals. We'll have to wait and see. But this is a strategy that they've been using for a while, and they're going to continue to do so until Election Day.
And I think that poll you and I talked about a couple of months ago of the last 50 years, who's the most popular Prime Minister, Stephen Harper's name was #1. So there you go.
That's right.
There's still a lot of love for Prime Minister Stephen Harper, the ex-Prime Minister.
Exactly.
Ray, even though it may be another case of Big Brother watching, most Canadians say they support governments censoring fake news.
Yeah, that's according to a poll that was conducted, an international poll conducted by Ipsos. They surveyed people in 25 countries, including here in Canada, and the results show that 61% of internet users around the world support having governments censor fake news. Here in Canada, we're talking about 46% of internet users who say they would support such a move. The problem is, obviously, who gets to decide? Is it the Prime Minister? Is it one of his cabinet ministers? What constitutes fake news? 90% of Canadians also revealed, they told Ipsos that they have fallen for fake news. I know it's happened to me a couple of times when I didn't check the source of the information that I had seen on social media or on the internet. The Federal Democratic Institutions Minister, Karina Gould, responded to that saying that the best way for governments to address the problem is to educate people. When you see something on the internet, make sure you know the source of the information. Make sure you're dealing with a credible news organization, because these days anyone can doctor a photo with Photoshop. There are also some softwares online that you can use to make a fake video look really real. So I think people need to educate themselves and make sure they don't fall for fake news.
Absolutely. Use some wisdom and discernment there. Ray, the debate on the government bill to ratify the new NAFTA deal or the USMCA has begun. Tell me more about that.
It's begun. The big question remains, when will Canada adopt that bill? Because the Trudeau Liberals, they want to be in lockstep with the United States. There is some issues in the U.S. Congress with some Democrats there resisting, opposing the new version of the free trade agreement. And Justin Trudeau is actually going to travel to Washington, D.C. next Thursday to discuss this issue face-to-face with President Trump. It's going to be their first official meeting since the G7 summit in Quebec last year, and we all know how that ended. You know, the summit itself went pretty well. Mr. Trump behaved himself, but after he left Canada, he fired a series of very critical tweet calling Mr. Trudeau weak and dishonest. But now, if you look at what his Vice President Mike Pence said when he visited Ottawa a couple of weeks ago, he said that the relationship has never been better between Washington and Ottawa. So it looks like they're back on good terms. They're going to be discussing the new NAFTA deal and also China, because Mr. Trudeau is trying to get those two Canadians, Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, freed. They've been detained in China since early December, as we've discussed many times. Problem is, China won't pick up the phone. They won't even take a phone call from Mr. Trudeau, nor his Foreign Affairs Minister, Chrystia Freeland. So Ottawa is counting on Mr. Trump to raise the issue when he does have a sit-down meeting with the Chinese president at the end of the month at the G20 summit. So a big day for Canada in Washington, D.C. next Thursday when the Prime Minister goes to meet Donald Trump at the White House.
And Ray, Jean Chrétien, former Prime Minister, says he's willing to travel to China to try and negotiate on Ottawa's behalf. Where do we stand with that?
Yeah. Well, as you recall, we talked about this a few weeks ago. Brian Mulroney, the former Prime Minister, actually floated the idea of Justin Trudeau hiring Mr. Chrétien as an ambassador or as some sort of representative to try and get a deal with China in the many issues between Ottawa and Beijing. Mr. Chrétien has said through a spokesman that he's not against the idea, that if the Prime Minister calls on him, he'd be happy to serve.
Ray, retiring MPs have begun saying goodbye.
Yeah, farewell speeches have begun because the House of Commons is set to adjourn for the summer and likely won't be back until after the next election. So retiring MPs, those who won't be candidates in the October election, have begun giving their farewell speeches in the House of Commons. There are some big names here. Kelly Leitch, the former Tory cabinet minister who also ran for the party leadership, she's not coming back. Aaron Weir, the former NDP MP who was kicked out of the party over some allegations. He gave a farewell speech the other day. NDP MP from Quebec, Christine Moore, also not offering again. Brad Trost, Larry Miller, Roger Kushner, the well-known and well-liked Liberal MP from Atlantic Canada. So a lot of MPs will be giving speeches between now and June 21st, which is when the House of Commons is set to adjourn. And those are a very special moment for those MPs and for those who are saying goodbye. Some emotional moments in the House of Commons these days.
Our parliamentary reporter, Ray Fillion, joining us once again from Ottawa. Thanks so much, Ray.
You bet, Hal.
Canadian airline passengers have long been frustrated with inconsistent rules and regulations surrounding passenger rights and compensation when it comes to flight delays and the like. Now, Canada recently passed a new airline passenger Bill of Rights with some regulations coming into effect July 15th, while others will not start until December 15th. Joining me now from Cyprus via Skype is Crystal Iratokritou, a legal advisor for AirHelp, an organization which helps travelers get compensation for delayed and canceled flights. Crystal, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you very much.
Now, perhaps the most common complaint is delayed or canceled flights, leaving travelers stranded. Passengers have the right to compensation for this, but how many of us are actually aware of that compensation?
In the European Union, where we have strong air passenger rights regulations for the last 15 years, about 20% of passengers are aware of their rights, and only 66% do claim for compensation. We do not have proper numbers for Canada at the moment because the new regulations have just been enacted, but we suspect that the numbers will be very similar until we actually educate passengers on their new rights.
So under the new rules then, Crystal, if a flight is delayed or canceled because of overbooking, what is the minimum compensation the airline will have to pay out?
Maybe first it is worth mentioning that the new laws will come into force in July and in December. In July, the passengers will be able to get compensation in the event that they are denied boarding. The amounts will vary from 900 Canadian dollars to 2,400 Canadian dollars. The amount depends on the total delay at their final destination following the rerouted flight on which the airline has put them. For a delay up to 9 hours, the compensation is $900. For a delay up to 6 hours, the compensation is $900. From 6 hours to 9 hours, the compensation is $1,800. And for a delay of more than 9 hours, the compensation is $2,400.
So, Crystal, if the flight is disrupted for safety reasons, then the airline is not required to pay compensation. Is that true?
If the flight is delayed for a safety reason that is outside of the airline's control, such as a mechanical malfunction that has been identified outside of the scheduled maintenance, the airlines indeed will not have to pay flight compensation. However, the airline will still have to provide care and assistance to the passengers in the form of meals, drinks, accommodation if an overnight stay is needed, transportation to and from the place of accommodation to the airport, as well as access to means of communication such as telephone calls or free Wi-Fi.
Now, what are some of the other minimum standards? I'm told that this now includes making sure that all passengers have access to working toilets?
Yes, the passenger must also have access to working toilets. There must be proper ventilation in the aircraft. They must be given medical attention if needed. And also importantly, the airline must communicate to the passengers in a clear and accessible way the reasons for the flight disturbance, and must update the passenger on the flight status every 30 minutes.
I've heard some concerns regarding a possible loophole for airlines when it comes to a delay caused by a mechanical problem discovered while on the tarmac. Is that true?
Indeed, the new regulations do not oblige the airlines to compensate the passenger if the delay is caused by a mechanical malfunction that is discovered while the aircraft is on the tarmac about to take off. In the European Union, such events would not be considered extraordinary. They would be considered as falling totally within the control of the airline. So in the end, we have a situation where passengers in Europe are fully compensated for this kind of technical problems, while Canadian passengers are not compensated. So we don't really understand why the same situation leads to different protections from one side of the Atlantic to the other.
Should Canadians really be raising these concerns with their members of parliament?
Canadians should definitely be raising these concerns with the members of parliament. AeroHelp is continuing its lobbying efforts in Canada, and we are now waiting to see how the Canadian Transport Agency will implement the rules on practical terms.
Now, what rights would a passenger have, Crystal, if a plane had to turn back partway through a flight because of a mechanical problem or maybe some other issue?
The airline will have to reroute the passengers as fast as possible to their final destination. The airline will have to provide care and assistance as meals, drinks, hotel to the passengers, and must also provide information to the passengers as to the reasons of the flight delay and the status update.
Now, we all really dislike it when our luggage gets lost. I mean, we can all relate to that. It's happened to many of us here, which can cause all kinds of personal and business complications. What are passenger rights for lost luggage?
Under the new regulations, passengers are entitled to compensation up to $2,100 in the event that their bag is damaged or lost. And the airline must also refund the applicable baggage fees.
Now, one of the interesting changes that it will be held by mid-December, airlines will have to ensure that children under the age of 5 are seated next to their parent or guardian, and kids 5 to 11 are in the same row and no more than 1 seat away from their parent. Is that true?
That's exact. Under the new regulations, a child of less than 5 years old needs to be next to his parent or accompanying adult. A child up to 11 years old needs to be in the same row, and a child from 12 to 14 needs to be in close proximity. There must be only one row between him and his parents.
Now, there are differing passenger rights from country to country. You've chit-chatted a bit about what's happening with the EU, and we've talked about what's happening here in Canada. Which country has the best rules, and which country has the worst?
The country that has the best rules is actually the whole of the European Union, so the 28 member states. We have a very strong air passenger rights legislation that came into force in 2005. That protects all passengers that fly from the European Union to any place, as well as all passengers flying from third countries to the European Union when the flights are operated by EU carriers. When it comes to the country that has the worst air passenger rights, actually there are a lot of countries in the world that still do not have any kind of protection for passengers.
What are some of those countries? Do you know off the top of your head?
For example, the United States have very poor air passenger protection. Passengers are only protected in the event of a denied boarding, while the vast majority of flights are rather delayed than overbooked.
Now, you also rate the airlines with regards to passenger rights. What are some of the top 3 in the world? When I was a kid, I remember my parents used to love flying with Lufthansa. I don't know if that's still the case anymore when it comes to passenger rights. Which are some of the best, and even some of the best here in Canada?
Every year, AirHelp is putting together its AirHelp Airline Score, where we list the best airlines in terms of punctuality, in terms of claim compensation processing. The best airline this year is Qatar Airlines. And in Canada, Air Canada, WestJet, and Air Transat were on the average. So there is still room for improvement for the 3 big Canadian carriers.
Now, when somebody runs into problems, how do we talk about getting compensation? Who should we talk to?
You can use AirHelp services. It is very easy. You just have to go on our website, airhelp.com. You give us some information about your flights. You upload your documents such as e-ticket, boarding pass, and from then AirHelp will take care of all the process. We will be fighting with the airlines. We always try to settle things amicably, but if this is not possible, we will take legal action on the passengers' behalf, and the passengers will not have to do anything. Also, we operate on no win, no fee, so if we don't manage to successfully obtain flight compensation, this is not costing anything to the passenger.
Crystal Eratokritou, a legal advisor for AirHelp. Thanks a lot for joining me today from Cyprus.
Thank you very much.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night.